Single dad CEO accidentally picks up the wrong kid from daycare and meets the mother who will steal his heart. The rain was relentless. Thick sheets of water pelted down from the sky, turning the city streets into gleaming rivers of chaos. Nathan Hayes stepped out of the sleek black car, flipping his umbrella open with one hand while the other held his phone to his ear. His voice was calm but firm, issuing directives through the Bluetooth headset. "No, tell them the Singapore deal is not negotiable. If they want to pull out, let them. We will not compromise quality for speed." He strode across the sidewalk toward the front of the daycare, his designer shoes splashing through puddles. It was his first time picking up his 4-year-old son, Ben. Normally, his assistant handled it, but she had called in with a family emergency. Nathan had glanced at his packed schedule, sighed, and told himself it would only take 15 minutes. It had to. As he reached the covered entrance of the daycare, a group of children stood waiting, their jackets zipped tight, small hands clutching backpacks. Rain smeared the glass doors behind them. One child, wearing a yellow raincoat with a hood and Spider-Man rain boots, turned around and looked directly at Nathan. "Daddy?" the boy called out hesitantly. Nathan's attention was split. His assistant was calling on line 2 about an urgent board update. He barely looked at the child's face, but the size, the outfit, it was exactly what Ben wore this morning. Nathan pocketed his phone momentarily and gave the boy a gentle pat on the head. "Hey, champ, let's get out of this weather." The boy walked with him obediently, glancing back once before taking Nathan's offered hand. Nathan quickly buckled him into the back seat, handed him a juice box from the cooler compartment, and resumed his call. Traffic was heavy. Nathan fielded 3 more calls on the way home. The boy in the back was quiet, watching the rain trace patterns on the window. Nathan smiled once during the drive and said, "Rough day at school, buddy?" The child nodded slowly but said nothing. By the time they reached the gated driveway of Nathan's townhouse, the rain had eased slightly. He turned off the ignition, unbuckled the child, and carried him inside. The boy stood just inside the doorway, dripping slightly on the marble floor, looking around with wide eyes. Nathan hung up his coat and looked back. "All right, Ben. Shoes off, then dinner." The boy just stared at him. Nathan frowned. "Ben?" No response. He crouched down. "Hey, bud, are you feeling okay?" The boy shifted uncomfortably. "Where's Mommy?" Nathan froze. "What did you say?" The boy looked at him, blinking. "Where's Mommy? And where's my turtle backpack?" It hit him like a punch to the chest. This was not his son. He shot up, heart thudding. He ran to his phone and pulled up a picture of Ben from that morning. Then he turned back toward the boy. The resemblance was shocking, but the eyes were different. The shape of the face, the quiet demeanor. His Ben was louder, more curious. This boy had barely said a word. Oh my God. Across town, chaos was unfolding. Sophia Carter stood outside the daycare, hair soaked, eyes wide with panic. Her son, also named Ben, had vanished. One moment he was there, lining up with the other kids, and the next he was gone. "Tia, prosip!" Sophia cried. "I saw him 5 minutes ago. He was in his yellow jacket." The daycare director was trembling, dialing emergency numbers. "We thought his father picked him up. He said Daddy and got in a car. We thought, oh my God." Sophia grabbed the woman's arm. "He does not have a father in his life. Who took my son?" Police arrived within minutes. A bolo was issued. Staff scrambled to check security footage. Sophia stood in the rain, barely breathing. Back at the townhouse, Nathan had already buckled the boy back in the car and sped off through the drenched streets. His hand shook as he called the daycare, but no one answered. He pulled up, hazard lights flashing, to a scene swarming with police. He stepped out, carrying the boy in his arms. I think I made a mistake," he said loudly. "I thought he was my son. I swear I didn't mean—" Sophia turned at the sound of his voice. Her eyes landed on her son in Nathan's arms. She screamed. "Ben?" Nathan gently set the boy down. The child ran into Sophia's embrace. She clutched him, sobbing. "Are you okay? Are you hurt? What did he do to you?" Nathan stepped forward. "Ma'am, please. I didn't know he looked just like my son from behind. I swear to you. It was an honest mistake." Without thinking, Sophia stood and slapped him across the face. "Don't you ever touch my child again." Nathan didn't speak. He just stood there in the rain, shame soaking through his clothes deeper than the water ever could. The cold white lights of the police station buzzed overhead as Nathan sat stiffly on the metal chair, his soaked blazer clinging to his back. Across from him, Sophia sat with her arms crossed, eyes blazing with a fury that made him feel smaller than he had in years. The little boy, now wrapped in a warm blanket, sat beside her, sipping hot chocolate handed out by one of the officers. The officer leaned over the desk between them, laptop open. "We've reviewed the footage from the daycare security camera. It clearly shows Mr. Hayes approaching the wrong child and taking him by the hand. The child did call out, 'Daddy.' There was no physical force, no sign of malice or coercion." Sophia shot to her feet. "He still took my son." The officer nodded patiently. "Yes, ma'am, and we understand how frightening that was. But based on the footage and Mr. Hayes's immediate return, plus the child being unharmed, it appears to be an unfortunate but honest mistake." Sophia turned to Nathan, her voice sharp. "Unfortunate? You think that's what this was?" Nathan stood, his tone low but firm. "I am sorry, I truly am. I was distracted and rushing. I thought he was my son. I did not look closely enough, and that is entirely my fault." She scoffed. "People do not just pick up the wrong child. You think because you wear a suit and drive a fancy car, you get to make these kinds of mistakes and walk away without consequences?" Nathan flinched at the accusation. "No, that is not what I think." "Oh, really? What do you think?" she snapped. "That a single mom like me should just be grateful you didn't decide to keep him? That I should say thank you for not being worse?" "I did not mean to frighten you," he said, hands open in front of him. "And I understand this doesn't make anything better, but if there's anything I can do, compensation, schooling, support—" "You want to pay me off?" she interrupted, voice rising. "You think you can fix this with money?" Nathan paused. "That is not what I meant. I just thought, well, don't," she said coldly. "You don't know anything about me or my son, and you sure as hell don't get to fix your guilt by throwing money at us." A silence settled between them, thick and sharp. Sophia's son tugged gently on her sleeve. "Mommy, he didn't hurt me." She looked down at her child, her jaw tightening. The officer stepped in. "Ms. Carter, you are within your rights to press charges, but you should know that based on evidence and witness statements, a case might not hold. The daycare staff confirmed the mix-up, and the footage supports Miss Hayes' claim." Sophia didn't respond. She picked up her bag, her son, and walked out of the room. Later that night, Nathan sat alone in his kitchen, untouched tea growing cold beside him. His house, usually pristine and quiet, now echoed with the sound of the boy's voice. "Where's Mommy?" He could not shake the image of Sophia's eyes, fierce, protective, and trembling beneath all that anger. He did not blame her. If it had been his son, he might have done the same. Worse, probably. He looked down at the family photo on the fridge, himself, his late wife, and his real Ben, barely 6 months old. So much had changed. He had worked his way through grief by working harder, staying later, caring less about anything that wasn't measurable or manageable. But tonight was a failure he could not shake off, a human mistake, and one that had shaken something loose inside him. Across the city, Sophia sat at the foot of her son's bed, watching him sleep. His tiny fists were curled under his chin. The yellow jacket lay crumpled by the door, an image she could not forget. Her phone buzzed, a text from her attorney. "If you want to pursue charges, we can file first thing tomorrow. But off the record, this looks like a genuine mistake. I don't think it will go anywhere." She put the phone down. Was she still angry? Absolutely. Was she terrified? Even more so. But deep down, as much as she hated to admit it, she had seen something in that man's face when he returned her son. Something real. Guilt. Relief. Shame. And something else. A kind of sadness that didn't belong to someone who had everything. The next morning, Nathan walked out of a board meeting and found himself hesitating in the hallway. Instead of going back to his office, he opened his phone and scrolled to a note he had saved. Sophia Carter, nurse at Midtown Pediatric Clinic. He stared at the name, thumb hovering. Something told him this was not over, and somewhere in a small apartment across town, Sophia was thinking the same thing. The Saturday morning air was crisp, with a soft breeze rustling through the early autumn leaves scattered along the paths of Central Park. Families filled the playground, parents chatting over coffee, children darting between swings and slides. Nathan stood just beyond the fence, clutching a small paper bag and watching the scene with more nervousness than he cared to admit. He had learned from one of the daycare teachers that Sophia often brought her son to this park on weekends. He was not sure what he expected to gain from showing up, perhaps another slap, or worse, a cold shoulder. But he needed to say it again. Not from behind a lawyer or under the fluorescent lights of a police station. This time as a man, not a CEO. He spotted them before they saw him. Sophia was crouched beside her son, tying his shoelaces. She laughed softly at something he said, her expression warm, relaxed. Nathan had never seen her like that, without fear, without anger, just human. Beautiful. He almost turned away. Almost. Then he heard it. "Ben?" came the excited voice of his own son, barreling toward the playground with his babysitter hurrying behind. Nathan straightened, his eyes darting between the two boys. They met in the middle of the park like magnets. Two identical yellow jackets, two Bens, same height, same energy. One mistake had started it all, and now, perhaps, something else could begin. Sophia looked up and froze when she saw Nathan. He raised a hand slowly, then gestured toward a nearby bench. She hesitated, then walked over, cautious, wary, but curious. He handed her the paper bag. "Apple muffins," he said, "from that bakery on 8th. I remember you mentioned your son liked them." She looked at it for a moment, then took it. "You remembered that?" He nodded, eyes on the boys now, laughing at the top of the slide. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said again. "Really?" Not with lawyers in the room, not under pressure, just me. Sophia glanced at him. "You already said that. I know, but I meant it. I still do." A moment passed. She did not speak, but she did not walk away either. "The boys get along?" she said quietly. Nathan smiled. "They do." They sat in silence, watching their sons, until the tension between them eased just enough to breathe. Over the next few weeks, the meetings became more frequent, some planned, others by chance. The boys asked to see each other constantly. Their friendship bloomed effortlessly, as if making up for the strangeness of how it all began. Nathan found himself lingering longer at daycare pickups. Sometimes he brought coffee for Sophia. Sometimes she shared extra cookies her son insisted on baking. Small things, unspoken apologies, rebuilding something without naming it. More importantly, Nathan started showing up differently, for his own son. He began leaving work early, silencing his phone during bedtime stories, learning how to braid tiny shoelaces and listen to stories about dinosaurs and invisible friends. He realized with quiet shock that he had missed years that could not be recovered, but maybe something new could be created. One afternoon, at the same park, Sophia arrived to find Nathan on the grass with both boys, building an elaborate structure out of sticks and pebbles. The light in his eyes was real, unforced. She joined them on the blanket, and when the kids ran off to climb trees, the conversation turned softer. He looked at her, a hint of vulnerability flickering behind his usual composed mask. "I do not know how to be a father," he said suddenly. "I thought I did, but I was wrong." Sophia tilted her head, surprised. "My wife died when Ben was 6 months old, complications from childbirth. One day we were planning nurseries and reading baby books, and the next I was alone with a child I didn't know how to hold." He paused. "So I hired help, delegated like I always do. I thought maybe love could be scheduled, outsourced." He shook his head. "But that day with your son, that mistake, it was like a punch in the chest. I realized how easy it would be to lose something I hadn't even taken the time to know." Sophia was silent. Nathan looked at her. "And the thing is, I'm grateful. Not for the fear I caused, but for what it woke up in me." She looked away, blinking fast. "I know what it's like to feel lost," she whispered. "My son's father left the day I told him I was pregnant. I was scared, broke, and I thought maybe no one would ever show up for us again." They both turned to look at the boys now playing tag, laughter echoing across the grass. Nathan's voice was low, honest. "Maybe sometimes we meet the right people through the wrong doors." Sophia gave a small nod, and neither of them noticed, but they had started leaning in, just slightly, as if drawn not by force, but by the quiet gravity of something beginning again. The sky opened without warning, releasing a sudden downpour that sent families scattering from the playground in a flurry of umbrellas and shouts. Nathan stood under the small overhang of the park shelter, holding his son close as the rain pelted the concrete. A few feet away, Sophia did the same, wrapping her arms around her little Ben as they both laughed at the unexpected storm. Their eyes met through the curtain of rain. For once, the moment was not tense or uncomfortable, just human. "Well," Nathan called over the sound of the rain, "looks like the weather wants us to stay a little longer." Sophia shook her head, wiping drops from her forehead. "We are soaked." "There's a restaurant just a block away," he said, nodding toward the road. "Warm food, hot chocolate. I can call ahead." She hesitated. "It's not a trick," he added quickly, "just dinner, with two kids who refuse to stop being best friends." Sophia looked down at the two boys, now playing a version of puddle tag, their laughter rising above the storm. She sighed. "All right, but I picked the dessert." Nathan smiled. "Deal." The restaurant was cozy, with rain-slicked windows and candlelight flickering on every table. It was the kind of place Nathan usually walked past without noticing. Tonight, it felt like a haven. They were seated in a quiet corner. The boys shared a booth seat and immediately started coloring on the kids' menu, their shoulders pressed together like they had been best friends forever. Sophia took a sip of her tea. Nathan watched her over the rim of his own glass of water, unsure how to begin. "So," he said at last, "has your son always had that unstoppable energy?" She smiled faintly. "Since birth. He came out kicking and never stopped." "Mine too," Nathan chuckled. "He once threw my phone into the toilet because I wouldn't stop working during playtime." Sophia laughed. "Sounds about right." They paused again, and Nathan leaned back. "It's strange, isn't it? How children are the smallest people in our lives, but carry the biggest weight." Sophia nodded. "They change everything." There was a softness in her voice, the same kind he had heard when she called out her son's name in panic that first day. He met her eyes. "You do all this on your own?" She nodded slowly. "His dad left before he was born, said he wasn't ready to be a parent. I was scared, but being scared and doing it anyway sort of became my specialty." Nathan looked down, running a hand through his hair. "I had help," he admitted. "Nannies, assistants, night nurses. I thought that was enough. Thought being a provider was being a father, but it turns out all that did was give me distance." Sophia's eyes searched his. "What changed?" he exhaled. "The day I picked up the wrong child, it shattered something. Not because of the scandal or how it looked, but because I saw a little boy in my back seat and realized I didn't even know he wasn't mine. What kind of father doesn't know his own son's voice?" There was a pause. The boys giggled beside them, entirely unaware of the conversation unfolding. Sophia's voice was soft. "I don't hate you." Nathan looked up sharply. She gave a sad smile. "I wanted to. I wanted someone to blame. But the truth is, I don't hate you." She looked down at her tea, then back up. "I hate that feeling," she said, "that paralyzing terror that something could happen to my son, and I would be powerless to stop it. That feeling doesn't go away, whether you're poor like me or powerful like you." Nathan nodded. His voice came quieter. "I understand, because for the first time in my life, I was afraid of losing something I didn't even know I had until it was almost gone." Their eyes met again, and this time the silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was intimate, real. The waitress arrived with dinner. Plates were passed, drinks refilled, and the boys cheered when the dessert Sophia had chosen, warm chocolate cake with ice cream, appeared. Nathan watched as Sophia helped her son cut a bite, gently wiping chocolate from his chin. She looked up and caught him staring. He smiled sheepishly. "You're a good mom," she shrugged. "You're learning to be a good dad." And just like that, the evening softened. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle, the children yawned in unison, and two people who had met under the worst of circumstances sat across from each other, unknowingly walking toward something neither had expected, but both had started to want. Not a second chance, but a new beginning. It started with a name. Nathan sat at his desk late one evening, the skyline of the city glowing beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of his high-rise office. His son had gone to bed hours ago, and his inbox was finally quiet. But something still tugged at him, something that had been lingering in his mind since their last dinner. Sophia's expression when she had talked about doing everything alone, her voice tight with emotion when she said she had become an expert at doing things scared. He typed her name into the company's internal HR archive system on a whim, unsure of what he was looking for. Just curious, maybe a way to understand her better, and then it popped up. Sophia Carter, former nurse at Midtown Community Hospital. Termination noted under failure to comply with procedural confidentiality. An old file, buried deep in an archive flagged as non-public. Nathan frowned. That did not sound like the woman he had come to know. Sophia was bold, principled, maybe a little guarded, but not careless, not unethical. Something about it felt wrong. He made a call to an old contact in the hospital's administration, a man who owed him a favor. It took less than an hour. Sophia had reported fraudulent insurance billing conducted by a senior physician, someone with high-level ties. She had filed a complaint internally, then externally when no action was taken. A week later she was fired on a technicality. The physician in question had since quietly resigned, but the record of Sophia's courage had been buried under paperwork and silence. Nathan leaned back in his chair, stunned. All this time, he had thought of her as a fierce, resilient mother, but she was also something else, something more dangerous in the world he came from. She was someone who refused to stay quiet when it mattered most. He dialed her number before he could talk himself out of it. She picked up on the third ring. "Hello?" "Hey," he said, voice quiet. "It's Nathan." There was a pause. "Is everything okay? Is your son?" "He's fine," Nathan said quickly. "He's asleep. I needed to talk to you." She exhaled, cautious. "About what?" "I found out what happened at Midtown, the truth." Another pause. "I see. I had no idea," he said, "that it was one of our branches, that the system I helped build let someone like you get punished for doing the right thing." There was silence on the line, but he could feel her breathing. "I've been around boardrooms long enough to know how often truth gets buried," Nathan continued. "But you didn't let it. You stood up for what was right, and I want to say I'm sorry, and that I admire you." Sophia's voice came softer now. "I didn't expect you to find that." "I did," Nathan said, "and I wish I had known sooner. I've been wrong about a lot of things, but not about you." She didn't speak for a long time, then finally, "Thank you." The words were gentle, but layered, not open, not completely. Nathan knew she was still holding back, still guarded, and he could not blame her. After all, he was still Nathan Hayes, the name on the building, the face in the press, the legacy tied to every hospital, including the one that failed her. "You do not have to forgive the company," he said quietly, "or me. But I just wanted you to know. Someone sees you now, really sees you." Her breath hitched, barely audible. "That means more than you know." And then the line went silent. Nathan stared out the window, the city below alive with lights and movement. But inside, something was still, something new, a kind of clarity. She was not just the mother of a boy he once mistook for his son. She was a woman who stood alone against power and spoke anyway, and somehow she had become the one voice he most wanted to hear. The quiet in the boardroom was unlike any Nathan had heard before. It was the kind of silence that came not from stillness, but from tension, a coiled, waiting thing. Across the long glass table, his father sat at the head chair, impeccably dressed as always, eyes cold beneath silver brows. The other board members had been dismissed. This was not an official meeting. It was a warning. "I heard about your involvement," the elder Mr. Hayes began, folding his hands, "with that nurse." Nathan did not flinch. "Her name is Sophia Carter." His father ignored the correction. "You're a public figure, a Hayes. We do not get involved in scandal, especially with women who have a reputation for legal trouble and whistleblowing." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You mean a woman who exposed fraud your hospital system let happen?" "Watch your tone," his father snapped. "Do not forget who gave you that seat." Nathan stood. "And maybe it's time I asked why I still sit in it." His father rose too, slower, deliberate. "You're my son, Nathan. You have a future most people only dream of. Legacy, influence, power. But if you continue this distraction, you will lose everything. Your inheritance, your voting rights, your place in this company." Nathan's heart pounded, but his voice remained calm. "I never asked for power if it meant I had to live as someone else." His father narrowed his eyes. "So you choose her over the family?" Nathan looked out the window at the skyline that once defined him, then back at the man who had shaped his ambition. "No," he said, "I choose me." That night, he packed his things. The penthouse apartment gifted by the board as a symbol of his status felt colder than usual. He looked around at the designer furniture, the untouched kitchen, the city view that once thrilled him. And he realized something terrifyingly simple. None of it felt like home. He loaded 2 suitcases into his car, woke his son gently, and together they left the place behind. Days later, news spread subtly but quickly through corporate circles. Nathan Hayes had stepped down from day-to-day operations. Rumors swirled, conflict with his father, disagreements over ethics, a personal scandal involving a single mother. But Nathan did not offer comment. Instead, he quietly announced the creation of a new fund, the Carter Health Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting whistleblowers, underpaid medical staff, and mothers re-entering the healthcare workforce. The irony was not lost on Sophia when she read the press release. He had named it after her. She sat with the newspaper in her lap, the sunlight filtering through her apartment window, her son playing nearby. Her heart was racing. A knock came at the door. She opened it to find Nathan standing there. Jeans and a sweater, no entourage, no polished image. Just him, a little tired, a little uncertain, but more real than he had ever been. "I left," he said. She blinked. "You what?" "Everything. The company, the legacy. My father said I had to choose." He paused, then smiled faintly. "So I did." She stared at him. "Nathan!" He stepped forward, holding out a simple folder. Inside was a proposal. Not for her, for the community clinic she worked at, now backed by independent funding, a grant from the Carter Initiative. It would expand care, increase salaries, and establish a whistleblower protection policy. "I wanted to help," he said, "not as a CEO, just as a man who believes in you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you give all that up?" His answer was soft but certain. "Because if losing money is the price of loving someone like you, it's the best deal I have ever made." For the first time, she let him in, not just into the apartment, but into her life. The city had turned cold again. October winds carried the scent of rain and fading leaves, and the streets glistened beneath the heavy clouds that hovered above. Nathan sat alone in his apartment, now modest, quiet, with nothing but the hum of the heater and the faint ticking of the wall clock to keep him company. He stared at the photo of his son taped to the refrigerator, a finger painting of their trip to the park, smiling stick figures under a yellow sun. But his thoughts were not with his son tonight. They were with her. Sophia, he had not seen her in days, not since the photo. The photo that had spread like wildfire through the media. Nathan Hayes at a corporate gala, standing beside a tall, elegant woman in a designer gown. She was laughing. He was leaning close. It was a moment frozen in time and twisted out of context. Nathan had not even stayed at the event longer than an hour. He had shown up out of obligation, shaken a few hands, posed for a few photos, and left. But it was enough. Enough to undo everything he had built with her. Across town, Sophia sat in the back room of the clinic, her lunch untouched. She stared at her phone screen, at the image of Nathan and the woman, and at the comments beneath it. Still in the game, guess the nurse was just a phase. Hayes knows where he belongs. She had told herself she was over it, that she did not care what the world thought, that Nathan was different. But the pit in her stomach said otherwise. She remembered the way her last relationship had ended, with a man who once held her hand in private but crossed the street when he saw her in public, who had told her she was too much work to bring home, who had called her strong to her face and embarrassing behind her back. She remembered how it felt to be chosen until it was time to be introduced. So when Nathan called the next day, she did not answer. And when he messaged, she read the words but never replied. Instead, she sat down that night, took a deep breath, and wrote, "Dear Nathan, you once told me that your world was built on decisions. Business, power, legacy, they were all about choosing. So maybe this is a choice too. I know what it is like to be the person no one chooses when the stakes get high. And I cannot be that person again. I will not be another secret, or someone you defend behind closed doors but keep in the shadows when the cameras flash. I need to know that if I fall, someone will catch me and stay, not just until the headlines pass. I do not want to be the weight that tips your balance. If loving me means risking everything, I understand if you choose not to. But I can no longer risk choosing someone who will not stand still when it matters." Nathan read the letter 3 times. By the end, his hands were shaking. He threw on his coat and stepped into the storm. It was past 10 p.m. when Sophia stepped out of the back door of the clinic, umbrella in hand, exhausted and ready to disappear into the rainy night. But there, standing just beneath the hospital awning, drenched from head to toe, was Nathan. He said nothing, just waited. She froze. "I did not want to crowd you," he said at last. "I did not want to call again or send another message. I just wanted to show up." She stepped closer, her eyes unreadable. "That night at the gala," he continued, "meant nothing. I left after 30 minutes. I only went because I promised an old friend I would show face. That woman, she was my college roommate's wife." Sophia stared at him. "And the cameras?" "I do not care about them anymore." "You used to," she said softly. "I used to care about a lot of things that do not feel worth it anymore." He stepped closer. "But I care about you." Rain dripped from his hair onto his collar, soaking through the fabric. "If you are the reason I have to keep walking away from everything that no longer fits who I am, then I will do it again. And again. And again." Sophia's breath hitched. "Because I would rather be yours in the shadows than someone else's in the spotlight," he whispered. "But I am not asking for shadows anymore. I want all of it, the light, the storm, and you." She took a trembling breath, and for the first time she did not pull away. Instead, she stepped into his arms, letting the rain fall around them. Not because it was a fairy tale, but because it was finally real. A soft breeze drifted through the community center courtyard, carrying the scent of fresh flowers and children's laughter. Sophia stood by the window, watching volunteers paint a colorful mural on the wall outside. Behind her, nurses moved through the halls of the newly opened Carter Health and Hope Center. Nathan had quietly funded the project, but it was her name carved into the front. He had insisted. It was her story that made it real. Their lives had blended slowly, naturally, not with declarations, but in the quiet rhythms of shared days. Grocery runs, bedtime stories, school drop-offs. Nathan's once pristine kitchen was now filled with crayon drawings and half-empty cereal boxes. Sophia no longer braced herself for endings. Instead, she began to believe in something she had never known: stability. Nathan learned to flip pancakes without burning them. Sophia learned to believe his promises, and the two Bens, so different in origin, had become brothers in every way that mattered. It was on a Friday afternoon that it happened. Sophia walked the boys home from art class, their paint-smeared hands clutching hers. At the corner near the park, a familiar old taxi rolled up. The back window slid down. Inside was Nathan, wearing a cap that read, "Ben and Ben's Dad." On the door, "Taxi home, carrying only one passenger, forever." The boys squealed. Sophia laughed, heart pounding. Nathan stepped out, opened the back door. Inside, wildflowers and a photo book. The last page held a velvet box, nestled between pictures of the boys. Nathan's voice was quiet. "I once picked up the wrong child. That moment could have ruined everything, but instead it brought me to you." He knelt on both knees. "No castles, no crowns, just this life, noisy and messy and ours. I want it with you." Sophia knelt too, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You already gave it to me, with pancakes and promises and 2 amazing boys. I'm home." He slid the ring on her finger, a simple band etched with one word: always. They never had a grand wedding, just a picnic in the park with bubbles, cupcakes, and joy. The 2 Bens held a sign: "We said yes too." The final touch came when the mural outside the center was completed. 4 figures holding hands in the rain, a yellow taxi behind them, and the words, "Family, not by blood but by heart." If this story moved your heart, even just a little, then you know what we believe in here at Soul Stirring Stories. That love comes in the most unexpected ways, that family is not always built by blood, and that healing often begins with a mistake, followed by a choice. Nathan and Sophia's journey reminds us that no matter how different our worlds may seem, when 2 souls are brave enough to stay, to listen, and to love, they can build a home out of nothing more than trust, laughter, and shared tears. If you felt the warmth, the ache, or the quiet hope in this story, we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more real, emotional tales that heal, inspire, and remind us of the goodness still alive in the world. And remember, sometimes getting lost is exactly how we find where we belong.